Welcome, Andriy.
Hey.
Did I pronounce it correct?
Yes, absolutely.
So I'm really interested about this topic. Why wrapped Bitcoin sucks? So please, let's all give him a warm welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It is my absolute pleasure to be here. It is my third time at Baltic Honey Badger, but actually the first time as a speaker here. And coming up today with this topic, it has been, quite problematic for me, because as you will see later on, what I do is I do bridging. I help people to transfer the assets from one blockchain to another. And here, in the place where I see Bitcoin maximalists, who are definitely not interested in other chains, referring to altcoins as shitcoins, and you may very well be true, then finding the right topic to discuss, it has been quite an issue. So I decided to go with this one, why wrapped Bitcoin sucks. So basically the reason for that it is that I have a lot of experience in bridging, in connecting different chains together, and I also see the limitations of having assets on another chains. And because Bitcoin is the cryptocurrency, the first one, the most important one, and I see the wrapped versions of Bitcoin on all other chains, I wanted to share some of my thoughts and knowledge and experience, what I have seen happening to it, and why I don't really think that having wrapped Bitcoin anywhere, it is a good idea. And last but not least, I will try to present some thoughts on what can we do to avoid doing that. I hope that makes sense for you. So the first slide has been, just a regular intro slide, like we are the bridge, we connect asset, we bridge liquidity, etc., etc. I don't think it is not necessarily important for this talk, but my team, they always ask me to have the slide like showing who we are. So I will just quickly skip to the next one. Now, essentially, all the wrapped assets, they are IOUs. So it is not the real asset. It is just the representation of the asset. So when we take Bitcoin and we use a bridge, I don't know, whatever bridge you may want, most popular ones are those that are transferred WBTC and RAND bridge that is transferring RAND BTC. They will issue for you on the chain you are traveling to the wrapped version. And there are some problems with them, as some of you may know, or if you don't, I will be happy to talk to you about that. Now, why do people want to transfer Bitcoin anywhere? Like, why we are having this conversation in the first place? Because, I mean, if you are just happy being on the original chain, you don't want to move your Bitcoin anywhere, especially to some bridge contracts or any other place. You're just happy to have your own Bitcoin. But sometimes people are trying to find a way to utilize some options that are currently available on other chains, but still having the possibility of retaining the original. So what are those options? Commonly, it could be used as a collateral on some chains. It can be used as a medium exchange. It could be storage of value. It can be traded on other chains. And when I say traded, I always mean the decentralized trading. So I, by no means, speaking about centralized exchanges when you are not just trading an IOU, a wrapped version of the asset, which is bad, but even worse, you are trading, those like fake numbers on your desk. So whenever you transfer your Bitcoin to the exchange, they're gone, right? They're now the exchange Bitcoin. I'm speaking about slightly different situation when you still want to trade, you want to do it in a decentralized way, and the necessary evil here is having the wrapped version of Bitcoin. And what are the problems related to that? So the main one, from my perspective, you may agree or not or disagree with me, it is liquidity fractionalization. That means that if you see somewhere WBTC and you see RAND BTC, those are two different Bitcoins from the purpose of the chain when you are bridging to. So, and this sucks badly because instead of one major asset you're familiar with, you understand, you now have a variety of assets that are supposed to be the same one, but in fact there are not. There are services that provide you this possibility of changing one to another, but I actually think that that even makes things worse, because ultimately users are confused and they are asking the main question, where is the real Bitcoin? And the real Bitcoin is on Bitcoin blockchain. All those assets, they're fakes, more or less. And it gets even worse because I named WBTC and I named RentBTC, but there are much more versions of that. And if you take a look at the variety of the chains that people can want to breach Bitcoin, it gets even worse there. Because if we take a look at the contracts of those destination Bitcoins, wrapped versions, they can even be re-breached from second chain to the third one, and the contract would again be the new one. And it is really hard to understand what is happening here. And I will speak a bit more now. The security concerns, it is another thing. So I mentioned, like, when you transfer your Bitcoin to an exchange, it's no longer your Bitcoin, it is now exchange Bitcoin. But if we are honest with ourselves, with the breach, it is somehow similar. Yes, it is easier to verify the contracts, and potentially the good breaches, they open source their code, and you can understand what is happening to your asset, how you can transfer it here, transfer it back. But at the same time, breaches are well known for being hacked. I do remember, like in 2016, 2017, each and every day people were writing about exchange being hacked and Bitcoins being stolen. And I think that right now in 2022, we're seeing pretty much the same thing with the breaches. Like, breaches got hacked. And that, again, leads in the user perception to the feeling that this whole operation, it is not safe. So that is what I mean by security concerns. Now, deviating from the original values. So we know that the maximum amount of Bitcoins that we might have ever, it is 21 million. But now, how do we count all those wrapped versions here? Especially those wrapped versions that are re-wrapped on the other chains. Yes, you can potentially trace them back to the original chain, and you can see that the number in circulation supply, it has not changed. But at the same time, all those IOUs, they dilute the value. In the end of the day, they do dilute the value. They lead to the inflation. They lead to creating existing of other assets. Some of them can potentially get being calculated for their market cap on the other chains, which let's say you take WBTC, and WBTC may be included in market cap ratings on the chain it exists on. By the way, I deliberately not name any other chain except for original Bitcoin blockchain. I just say other chains to make everyone happy, hopefully. And they are being calculated on the destination chain as well. And the value is being calculated. And their value is being calculated and then represented in the numbers when this next chain that Bitcoin has been breached to, it is speaking about its total value locked. But this chain, it did not invent Bitcoin, it did not produce Bitcoin, it simply has this wrapped version and still calculates it into its own flow, which is ultimately bad and wrong, I think, from the point of math. So can we avoid? We can, if we stick to the original one. We cannot expect all the players on the market to do that because it is already out of the box. So all those wrapped versions, they are already on the market. They are already being used. And I don't think that we by any means can or should forbid their usage. But what we should do is we should understand the problems and limitations that are associated with the wrapped version of Bitcoin and take it into account. And I would like to finish this presentation because I thought that maybe there would be some questions, and I know that the schedule is tight. I wanted to say that, for example, we explored stacks that are building decentralized services, they are building smart contracts on top of the original Bitcoin chain, and they are still anchoring it, and they are not playing with the wrapped version of Bitcoin. And I have had an opportunity to know the guys personally. They're, true believers. They're doing the good thing, and I think what they are doing, it is pretty much to the alternative, the one that is happening on the market with all those wrapped versions here and there. And we are doing integration with them, helping to bridge to and from the stacks, utilizing the tag that they have, while sticking to all those values they have. And yeah, I hope that you enjoyed it. Here is the Twitter if you want to add. And that's about it.
Cool. Okay, now we have a lot of time for questions. So, any questions? Okay, let's start bit by bit.
Yeah, I was the same guy who had a lot of questions yesterday. Andrew, as we spoke outside, you said that there is a cool way of doing bridges in a relatively decentralized way, right? With the consensus that you received it on one chain and locked there. I honestly don't think that we will get rid of the wrapped bitcoins anytime soon, so let's at least try to find a good way of wrapping them. Do you have this technology with the Bitcoin chain?
I think that what is important here is that whenever we see the variety of the versions of the wrapped Bitcoin, is that we ask ourselves the question, what happened before they were issued? That is the messaging problem we were speaking about. And when the messaging happens, when we send the message to the chain that now there is a wrapped version, we should ask ourselves how this message has been delivered and whether this message has been delivered in a properly decentralized way. Because if, let's say, it is my own validator, just the one that my bridge runs, and this validator says, okay, I acknowledge that this transaction is valid, you will agree that this is not decentralization, right? Because it is just a single validator. So whenever we speak about messaging protocols and we speak about bridges in general, we need to think not about just the original chain. We need to think about validators decentralization in the bridging mechanism, how that happens, and if we can trust it, or should we trust it? And if we can verify that this transaction has really happened, that is also part of the security question, right? Because a single validator, it is more potentially dangerous, or maybe not. Sometimes it really depends. But whenever we do the bridging process, and whenever we transfer asset from blockchain A to blockchain B, we should take a look how the information has been processed for this transfer to make happen. Now, when I speak about messaging protocols, the best analogy would be TCP/IP in the common internet. So, which protocol do we use to transfer the information? It is not really related to the bridging process, but if this protocol is, if you can trust it, then this transaction has been valid. And if not, that raises a lot of questions about the assets that have been transferred here and there, and whether those assets should have the same value as the original asset. I think that would probably be the answer. Hope so. Maybe did I answer the question or?
Maybe the second, just the follow-up. Any chance there is a method that this messaging or verification method sort of checks that the bitcoins on the Bitcoin original chain is really locked, so they cannot be reused or whatever? Because then we will have a problem of having more than 21 million.
Sure, and we are already having this problem, like between you and I, and all of you here. So we don't know how we can take a look in the chain explorers. We can try to verify, but sometimes it is incredibly hard to verify all the original bridge contracts to really make sure that right now in circulation combined we have less than 21 million. Even though that we are far, well, not so far, but just a bit far from the whole circulation bit out there, but it can be that some bridges are misbehaving, and if we try to, put all the numbers together, we may be surprised with the result.
Okay.
There was another question here I saw before.
Okay, yeah, I saw someone wanted to ask it.
Okay, I have a question. So.
Sure.
From your experience, when you check some of those protocols, some of those bridges, have you seen, because of course you're sending the Bitcoin to, I suppose, a kind of a multisig, something like that. We know the system, for example, Liquid has 15 signatures, and they also have a emergency mechanism that I think they only need 3 or 2 or something like that. But have you seen any protocol that the security was really weak, that the Bitcoins are held in a like a homemade system?
You know, it's I try not to throw rotten tomatoes at the players at the market. I can answer your question like this: yes, I have seen, but I will probably not do any naming. I would say that the problem exists. It is a valid question, but I would try to not myself point any fingers for the this conversation is being recorded. I blame someone, then this guy comes to my apartment in the middle of the night, tries to kill me. I try not to do that kind of thing.
Any other question? Yep.
My question would be probably like a long one. I want to start with, how do you define Bitcoin maximalism? Because yes, you're working with shitcoiners and stuff, but
I define it by using the word shitcoins.
yeah, it's like so how do you define Bitcoin maximalism? Because it seems like you are kind of Bitcoin maximalist.
I mean, I wouldn't necessarily, call myself that, because in my line of work, it is really hard to ignore the existence of all the other chains, because I've been working with the core teams here and there. What I'm doing would be impossible without that. But I mean,
Definition. Maybe.
let's say when I select for myself, when I select the asset, I can just put onto my cold wallet and forget about it. I mean, like, keep it until my son is, like, I don't know, 20 years old, which will happen 18 years from now. That would probably be Bitcoin, because I don't really believe in all the other assets. So I can see the technological potential here and there. For example, today I've been listening to the presentation from Pandora and all those cool things that will happen in Bitcoin ecosystem, including algo stablecoins, DeFi mechanisms, lending protocols are there, but also all those parts of the puzzle that have been actually available on other chains for quite some time, and here we will still need to wait for that. So by the time that algo stablecoin is being run on Bitcoin blockchain, we already have like Luna collapse, right? This year.
Hopefully.
Well, UST collapsed already, right? That is like history. So some of the things that will emerge in the ecosystem have already happened in the other ecosystems, and while not trusting the other digital assets, at the same time, I see that there are technological ideas here and there which can potentially bring new use cases to the market, which are not, always working right. We have seen blockchains failing. We have seen a lot of problems associated with the trust. We have seen a lot of problems about blockchains, stopping working. I don't think that in 2022 that would be possible for Bitcoin, and that sort of makes me a maximalist, in that sense. But I still look here and there, and it is interesting to do the bridging just for this whole thing that experience, right? I see all the new chains emerging. I see the chains, and I try to evaluate them if they will be popular. I'm not trying to say they're good, or I'm not trying to say they're better. I'm saying that whenever I integrate a new chain here and there, I try to answer to myself this sort of business decision. If the chain gonna be popular, will we see the amount of transactions going in and going out? It is not a question of trust. It's not a matter of trust. It is not a matter of believing in other chains. It is just, common sense from the business perspective, acknowledging that there are people that want to use other chains, evaluating if those chains are gonna be used or not. I'm not even speaking about any sort of price issues. I'm just speaking in terms of adoption. And that makes it interesting, and I cannot say that I'm not looking into other chains. I do. I will try to finalize this, idea. So I'm married. I love my wife. I'm with her. I always come home to my wife. But that doesn't mean that whenever I see pretty girl walking down the street, I'm not, looking in her direction. So that is hopefully.
Maybe this is the thing you should have not said. So, thanks.
Thank you.
I'll probably elaborate why I asked the Bitcoin maximalism question, because so I work in RGB, and I know that one of the definitions of Bitcoin maximalism is the person who does not. So basically, if you are not working on layer 1 on Bitcoin with Bitcoin, you suck. Like whatever, even Lightning, there's quite a bunch of people who think that if you tried even Lightning for them is already kind of like shady stuff. So, but again, and we probably know from technical perspective that Lightning is in fact a different asset already. It's not, it's kind of not the same Bitcoin. And RGB and BFROS, those are the technologies who even add more on that. And with from the perspective of RGB and on PvP stuff that we're doing, the wrapping Bitcoin is basically making it can be defined as making it more programmable, more private. So because you cannot add programmability, privacy, and scalability to the first layer, we know it because there are many blockchains that try to do that, but they failed or are about to fail. So layerization is the way to make Bitcoin as layer 1 more programmable, but of course you need to kind of introduce new stuff. So will this make, wrapping it and making Bitcoin more programmable based on the technology which is based on Bitcoin, which is anchoring on Bitcoin and doing everything in this ecosystem, would still think there would be scams?
Yeah, of course there's going to be scams. A lot of scams are going to be there. We are encrypted, right? We have a history of scams. It is part of the culture.
Will those people also be Bitcoin maximalists? No?
It is, hard to answer. It really depends on whom do we call maximalists. I mean, as I said, sticking to the single asset for holding, or sticking to the single technology for operating. Those are two different perspectives. And you mentioned, even in your case, that
Same asset. It's from technological point of view, kind of wrapping Bitcoin on RGB is still the same asset.
Yeah,
Just making it more programmable, don't inflate it or whatever.
Yeah, I understand that. And unfortunately, I don't have here a slide about RGB, but I, for example, referred to the example with what the guys from Stacks are doing, right? Yeah. So I'm given the Stacks example as the opposing example to what is happening with the WBTC or RenBTC on other chains. So it is not necessary that the wrapped version on Bitcoin on other chains is the only solution to the technological concepts that we need to solve, to what market needs, right? This is exactly why I had this slide, because I tried to show that there is an alternative. We don't necessarily need to jump from each and every other chain, issuing here and there all those different versions of wrapped Bitcoin.
Just to add, there is some people, you were saying about maximalism, there is some people that consider SegWit shitcoin as well. So yeah, I mean, it depends. Yeah, I mean, complicated topic. We run out of time. I know there is a couple of questions more. Okay, well, let's do it, but let's do them fast. Let's start here.
I will answer yours too. You can count on me, Kira.
Mine is a really, really fast question. 1 month ago, there was I don't know what number of wrecked, the Nomad bridge was wrecked, 200 million. My question is, when I read this stuff, I always put myself in the shoes of the holders of the IOU. what happened when the bridge has been emptied? My IOU is no, yeah. What that token, that IOU that I had, it then. What can I do with that? I know that I won't be able to redeem it with anything, but I'm thinking I'm going to the bridge with the IOU, and the bridge is empty.
I understand the question. What is happening to you as the user who deposited the real asset on the bridge, and then the bridge got hacked, and you want to answer me what happens to you, right? Like the user. Is like everyone here 18 years old plus? Yeah? You are fucked.
Yeah. Okay. No, but my question was like, what do I see? Do I see like do I see the transaction that emptied my stuff? Do I see what from the technical point?
You can see yes. So whenever you try to bridge back, when you come with the IOU to the bridge interface, and you do return the deposit, and now you want to claim the asset that you locked, you will get an error. You will not be able to do that because there are no assets there. So that is the problem here. Now, in some cases, that really it is a complex question. It depends on who is behind this company. So you mentioned mnemonic hack, and I think that they found, I'm not sure, but I think they found sort of the way to compensate some of the users. Not sure about that. We'll need to verify. For example, in the wormhole hack that happened this winter, Jump compensated. They deposited all the assets stolen on the bridge. So basically, users were able to withdraw what they put on the bridge, but still someone needs to pay for that. So it is a question if some company, some third party, either the owner of the business or some big investors will pay for the losses, or you as the end user will pay for the losses. That is, up to, it differs.
And just a follow-up question of that. When I breach my Bitcoin in some of these contracts, the traceability of my Bitcoin is lost in the breach. I mean, if some of us breach in the contract, I lost the traceability of my singular UTXO, or can I follow it then to see what good life my attacker is?
Usually it is lost. Usually, in most cases, the Bitcoin that you deposited, once redeemed, would not be the same Bitcoin. And that unfortunately leads to some illicit activity associated with the bridges. You can take a look at the elliptic report on the cross-chain transactions and how some bad things are happening there. I'm not saying that it is always the case, but it is sometimes the case, and we need to acknowledge that. I will be, if you want, we can continue this conversation. I just don't want to take any more of the time.
No, it was great to have some questions, and thank you for all the answers and for the talk.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so now I want to invite to the stage Josef Tetek. We're going to be talking about recovery seed security and Shamir backup.
I think that's fine. If you need more time, more questions. Yeah, it's fine. All right, thank you. Hello, everyone. I know it's been a long day, so we are going to keep it light, talking about death and losing all your coins. I'm from Czech Republic. We like this kind of humor, So, yeah, recovery seed security and Shamir backups. Just a short introduction. I write some books, but these are in Czech language, so you probably won't get to read them. The Bitcoin book is going to be translated into English next year by my good friends Brains. I do some Twitter spaces for Trezor. These are called Fiat Free. We had Anita Posch, we had people from Bitcoin Acacia and stuff, and we are discussing Bitcoin adoption in the developing world. Lots of interesting stuff, so follow us on Twitter. I write for Bitcoin Magazine and BTC Times. I'm actually going to cover this conference for Bitcoin Magazine. Yeah, and let's go to the topic. All right, yeah, so now please go back. Now I spoiled it. All right, so from time to time, you should ask yourself if you're happy with your security seed setup and or recovery seed setup. You don't have to answer that now, but just ask yourself if you're happy about like how you actually handle your seed. And you shouldn't do that for just the current value of your Bitcoin, but for the future value of Bitcoin, depending on how bullish you are. But let's say Bitcoin hits $1 million sometimes in the future, and you should consider if you're still happy about how you handle your Bitcoin. And what I mean when I say like a seed setup, it's basically this. It's not a single thing, and it depends a lot on what kind of wealth you have to secure. Could be the current value or the future value. And so let's say you have like $10 of Bitcoin. Of course, you do not give that much of a damn what happens to it, especially if you're living like in a Western country. So if you don't have a seed, you use a wallet of Satoshi, or you keep it on some exchange. It doesn't matter. You don't really own your Bitcoin. You should know that. But since it's just $10, doesn't matter that much. As you go up, like in a amount of wealth you are trying to secure, you should start giving a damn. So you should have some single seed. Could be like some software wallet. Could be a Trezor, some hardware wallet. Then you should reinforce that with some passphrase. And then you should also think about redundancy so that you don't create like a single point of failures. If you have a single seed at your home, it burns down, you lose all your Bitcoin. If you have Shamir backups, maybe multiple devices, passphrases on top of that, then you are not relying on just one single point, single sheet of paper and stuff. So, but that of course means if you have like $1 million worth of Bitcoin, you are going to think about that, and you should. Right, so why we should really think about it and consider like the security seed layers is because ultimately only 3 things can happen to your Bitcoin. Either you lose it, and if you hold your Bitcoin at some exchanges or with some custodians, I think in the end you are going to lose it. We have seen this many times in the history, and people on Celsius could tell you about it, or some other exchanges. So we sort of handle that with self-custody and hardware wallets. We can also sell it or spend it all. I think that's unlikely for most Bitcoiners. We have like low time preference and stuff. We can spend our Bitcoin, but usually we won't spend everything. And we are going to die, all of us. So we should think about inheritance. We should think about like, okay, I keep it throughout my life. I don't spend it. But I should think about if I have a kids or some favorite friends, I should or some charity, I should think about how does the Bitcoin continue existing, and it's not just a donation to all the community. You might want that, but it should be intentional. And I think Shamir and inheritance guides, I'm going to explain what that means, is a good tool for that. Yeah, just some numbers reinforcing like the argument that it all boils down to seed setups. This is data pulled from our service desk, support desk, and we can see that around 50% of the cases where users lose their Bitcoin is connected to lost or forgotten seed or passphrase or phishing, which basically means that you type your seed into some website or some fake app. So it's a huge problem. It all boils down to seed security, passphrases, and stuff. Yeah, stuff like that. So how do people actually like do that? How do they manage to lose Bitcoin? Like this is like the most common scenarios. People try to remember seed phrases or passphrases. So you rely on your memory and you forget it. And a good example that one of my friends at the company told me is we don't actually even remember our phone numbers anymore. Like 20, 30 years ago, it used to be common that we remembered our phone numbers and phone numbers of our family and ICQ numbers. now we don't even train our memory that way anymore. So we don't basically remember anything, and that's fine. That's like the brain, the memory isn't a good storage device for that. We should use physical media. So don't rely on your memory. You shouldn't rely on a single seed, because that's just a single point of failure, so you are going to use it or lose it anyway. If you have a single seed and you think that this is a problem and you are trying to solve for the redundancy, some people tend to make multiple copies of the single seed, and then it gets compromised, it gets stolen from. And some people, sometimes we see that this is happening. They're coming up with their own crypto scheme, either splitting the single seed like into multiple parts, and they, of course, the entropy isn't there, so it can be brute forced. Or they will just shuffle some words around, so no one will know, and even the people don't know then. So they're trying to come up with their own crypto, and a good best practice from the 90s is you never go your own crypto. It used to mean like cryptography, now it's shitcoins, but it's a good practice. Don't do your own crypto, like cryptography and shitcoins as well. So, and we should keep in mind like the realistic scenarios. We are all afraid of the government like coming after us and like taking our coins, but that might happen. But we should like hold on to our coins until that time, because what's more probable is if we rely on just a single location, like our houses, it may burn down. It happens. So if your house burns down, will you still get to access your stash, like your Bitcoin? That's one of the scenarios you should account for. If you have to flee the country at 4 a.m., not as unrealistic. Happened in Ukraine. There are Bitcoiners that had to actually leave the country, and since they were Bitcoiners, they got to preserve at least some of their wealth, because the real estate in a country in the eastern part of Ukraine probably not too valuable now. If you die at a conference, might happen as well. Yeah, you never know. You never know. So, but yeah, I can die. I can die on a plane. I can die at the street and in a pub, you know, whatever. So, will my family access my Bitcoin? This is very important for me and should be very important for you. So, if you didn't think about that, be very careful here. But I can live on. I can survive this conference. So then I should also account for that if my bad cousin, bad friend won't access my stash. So these are the realistic scenarios we should think about, right? Yeah. And I think Shamir backup, and I'm gonna explain, you know, next slide what it actually is a very neat solution for all these scenarios and all these considerations, because we get to have the good level of security that is like BIP49 recovery seeds provide us, but we have the redundancy, we have the multiple shares, multiple lists of seed words without compromising on the security. So Shamir backup has both of these qualities, which is pretty amazing. And it's nothing new. Like the cryptography behind Shamir secret sharing, it's nothing new. This is Adi Shamir. He came up with it in 1979. So it's not like we are coming up with our own crypto. It's been around for almost 50 years now. And Trezor, the Satoshi Labs, only standardized it for the use in mnemonic codes under a slip 39. Yeah, it's a threshold secret sharing scheme, meaning there's a threshold of n. Usually it's 3 out of 5. It could be up to 16 shares if you use Trezor Suite. I wouldn't recommend like 15 out of 16. That would be pretty hardcore. But you should have like some level of redundancy there. Like don't do 3 out of 3, do like 3 out of 5 or 3 out of 6. Yeah, so these are the usual, most commonly used setups. And a neat thing about that, it's also compatible with passphrases. All right. Yeah, and you should also think about inheritance planning. There are luckily people that think about stuff like that, like Pamela Morgan. I recommend her book. It's been published like 5 years ago. I hope to see her sometime at some conference. She came to Prague in 2016 or 17. It was like one of the best talks I've seen. So check out her book. And one of the good ideas that Pamela has is you should, like, of course, set up your seed. I recommend Shamir. Do it like place the shares into multiple locations. Otherwise, it doesn't have any. There's no point, right? It should be multiple locations, ideally multiple cities or multiple countries or multiple continents. Depends on how much time you have and how much you are trying to protect. And it's individual, of course. And then you should write down the inheritance guide. That's a very good point from Pamela. You should just explain to your survivors what's going on. Like, all right, I'm dead, and there is something called Bitcoin. It may be pretty. It may be pretty valuable, and there's this thing called Shamir. There are shares there. This is the threshold. This is how we should recover it. And maybe this is my friend you can contact for that. Because if you don't put down the contact for some reliable friend, it might be the case that your family is going to contact some stranger on the internet and send the shares to that stranger. So it's still a good point to put down some reliable contact. And then you should check and update the Shamir and the inheritance guide regularly so that it doesn't deteriorate, right? You can lose some of the shares. If you have like 3 out of 5, you can lose 1 or 2 shares. But if you do, you should renew it. You should basically move your funds to another Shamir scheme and update the inheritance guide. Yeah, and then hopefully you will get to live long. So another good consideration is the physical attacks. And I recommend to read through Jameson Loeb's database of physical attacks on Bitcoiners. It goes way back several years. Jameson Loeb himself was basically attacked. So I believe, though the physical attack isn't maybe as likely as some of the other scenarios we have talked about, it still is a consideration, especially if Bitcoin goes up in value. And I believe Shamir is still a very good solution for that. Because if your home gets breached and if you are held at gunpoint and stuff, the decoy wallet won't work. Like the idea that you have like a passphrase, like this is for the thief passphrase, and you have like $10 on that wallet, that's not gonna work. And if they are like torturing you and stuff, which happens, sadly, you are going to give up everything you can. And the point is, you shouldn't have an access to your life savings in the single location. So you should have Shamir set up, and in the location, like in the office or at your home, usually it's your home, the threshold shouldn't be reachable from that location. So let's say you have 2 devices. One device is backed up by Shamir in multiple locations. It takes time to get there, to combine everything. And then you have second device, which has just the spending cash, a couple $1,000, let's say, and this is accessible from your single location. And you just don't have an access to your life savings from your home. Because time is costly to the attacker. And if you are held at gunpoint, you give up everything you have and you just don't have the access to the other stash. But let's say you agree, okay, I have much more Bitcoin, but I have Shamir set up and it's in multiple locations and we can go there. It's very costly to the attacker to actually follow you around the city or into another cities and other countries and recover it. Right. So some principles for seed security and Shamir backups. Never rely on your memory. That goes for passphrases as well. You know, passphrase. Some people try to just remember it and rely on their memory, which is a very bad practice. You can forget it, or you can remember it, but you can die, and then your family won't have any access. Only use physical media. Classic thing. Don't take a photo. Don't put it into your computer, into some cloud service. CryptoSteel, which have a booth over here. They have very good solutions for that. Or there's this tiny seed. I also like that. So check it out. Check it up. Check it regularly, especially if you use multiple locations. You should make sure it's still there. Make like a habit of it. Maybe January 3rd or some special date. Just every year, check your recovery seed setup. Write down the inheritance guide, because otherwise, don't rely on the memory of your loved ones as well. It should be really put down, because I may die with my wife and my kids are small, and so what happens then? Don't make your own crypto, and yeah, time is your friend and attacker's foe. Right, so Jameson Lopp, I really like all his work. I really recommend following him and reading through his stuff. He has this stress test of seed backup devices, and it's very interesting and quite important to know like what your physical media can take. And CryptoTech Odin seems to be like one of the best solutions out there. I think it's quite important to know like what the materials can withstand. But if you use Shamir backup and you count with losing some of the shares, the material isn't as important. So also depends on how much you are trying to secure, right? But if you cannot afford like 5 of these Odins, still you should go for Shamir, write it down on paper, or there are like unterrible papers, also interesting solution. It won't withstand the fire, but still a good solution. Right, yeah, and so Shamir, it's not used just in Trezor. Trezor Model T was the first hard wallet that implemented Shamir, but it's also supported by Keystone. Unchained Capital uses Shamir as well. Yeah, Electrum Blue Wallet and Airgap. I hope we get to see more of the services supporting Shamir in the future. But just for you to know, it's an open standard. If something goes wrong with your Trezor, you can recover it in other devices as well, or other wallets. Okay, that's it for me. Questions? Thank you.
We have time for 2 questions, and there is one already there. I'll let you for the end. Okay.
Hi. So I'm reading this from the Bitcoin wiki. It says the Shamir secret sharing algorithm is sometimes promoted as a way to divide control of Bitcoins, but in practice, there are many pitfalls and trade-offs that make it not worth it. And it cites a blog post by Jameson Lopp titled Shamir's Secret Sharing Shortcomings.
Yeah, good that you bring it up. It's from Bitcoin Wiki. As you say, it cites Jameson Lopp. And Jameson Lopp wrote, I believe it was August or April of this year. Was it called? Like some long form article on recovery seeds. And he goes back to Shamir and he quotes, or he mentions Shamir backup from Satoshi Labs, and he mentions it's a superior, like, because this is about like generic Shamir. There were attempts at using Shamir for security seed or recovery seed before Shamir, before the Slip 49, and this is what Jameson Lopp wrote like in 2017 or 18, before Slip 49 was around. So now Jameson went back to that in, I don't know, it's one of the latest posts of his, and he actually like goes back to this quote, and he says that the currently standardized Slip 49 Shamir backup is well done.
So I have a follow-up then. Like, could you then contrast this with other forms of this kind of protection, like CDEX or there's another one. Okay, at least CDEX or maybe.
Yeah, CDEXOR, I think it's good. The problem is it's 2 out of 2, as far as I know. So you don't get to, is it or is it? All right. It's N out of N. Yeah, so there's no redundancy. That's what I believe is kind of a problem. Like, because if you lose one of the shares, you're screwed. And what I especially like about Shamir is you count on things not being perfect, and you can lose some of the shares, and you still won't lose the access to your coins. Yeah, so the question is, how do the shares look? It's, in Trezor, it's a list of 20 words. So it's not 12 or 24, it's a list of 20 words. They're from the BIP39 list, so it looks like a seed, yeah. Yeah, you can use Steel Backup, you can use CryptoSteel. There are like physical backup solutions intended for Shamir backups, yeah.
First of all, thank you for pointing out that people have the tendency to overcomplicate stuff. Like, for example, when you have $30 worth of Bitcoin and then you set up 5 of 7 multisig, you buy 7 Trezors, and you know that you will lose all of them and therefore you will still be blocked. What, from your experience, which one was the worst overcomplicated setup that a person or a company, for example, ever did, which was so overcomplicated that they either got blocked or they lost everything or whatever?
Well, it's usually a reliance on the memory. Like one of my good friends, libertarian Bitcoiner, he like, I was asking him like, how does he secure his Bitcoin, just like in general terms, and he said, oh yeah, it's very secure. I only remember it, and my wife remembers it, and that was like his idea of being super secure, and yeah, so that's usually what happens. Or people try to be clever, shuffle the words around, split the seed into multiple parts. They just make their own crypto, and it's not like super complicated, but they trying to obfuscate stuff and rely on themselves, and yeah, that's not perfect. That's yeah, they will lose it.
One last one I saw. Okay, let's do that one, and that's it. And we have after party.
Thank you. So yeah, I'm actually a very big fan of Shamir secret sharing. I've been using it for a long time on my own cold backup. But I noticed one thing you said, which I'd like to maybe, I don't want to correct you too much, but you said a device with Shamir and then another one without. I would push back on that and say not a device that has also been split with Shamir, because then it's not split anymore if you still have a device lying around. So, you know, don't have a device lying around which has your Shamir split all over the world, and then you've just got a device sitting in your drawer. It's not split anymore. It's together on the device.
Yes. Yeah, I actually think like one of the best setups would be to have 2 devices. Have one device like with your life savings, do the Shamir on that, move your funds over there, and destroy the device or wipe it. And then you have the second device, which is, or it can be the same device actually, and just use that for spending, just spending cash. But yeah, like you say, if you have the Shamir split up in multiple locations, and you have the device that has the access to that stash, and it's lying in your drawer, of course, then it's
I also
useless.
just want to add one more little thing. You didn't mention at all any of the on-chain advantages of a single sig compared to a multi-sig, because a lot of people use multi-sig for this kind of thing, which is wrong in my opinion. You know, it's a bad idea to have like a multi-sig when it's purely yourself. Because of, you know, on-chain multi-sig is you know, larger, more expensive transactions, especially when you've got a lot of stuff going in, and Shamir is obviously a single sig, so you know, you don't have that issue.
Yeah, and you can actually combine multisig and Shamir, and I believe like there are different properties of multisigs and Shamirs. A good property of Shamir is you don't have to rely on any third-party service, right? You can do it all yourself and nobody has to know, but maybe then the problem is nobody knows, so you should write down the inheritance guide and consider that. Yeah.
What do you suggest to people who actually can't afford such an extensive infrastructure? So the 99%.
Oh yeah, well, that's actually the point of one of the early slides. Don't overcomplicate it. If you have like $100 worth of Bitcoin, this is not for you probably. You don't need that. You probably need only like a single seed setup. If, as the value of Bitcoin goes up, you stack, the number go up and stuff, then this opens up to you, and you should consider like redundancy and stuff. But if you cannot afford it, it means you don't have as much Bitcoin. And if you have like $10,000 worth of Bitcoin, you should think about like spending some of it on the security, right?
Let me try.
So
different
it's a function of how much wealth you have to support, to secure.
How come no enterprise uses that?
Sorry?
How come no enterprise uses that?
I don't understand.
A company, not a single person, but like say a custodian. What would they use?
Yeah, so there are solutions like Unchained Capital, Hermit Wallet. So I'd probably like think about that. Yeah, it's a multi-sig, but they use Shamir as a backup for the recovery seed. Do I answer a question? Or?
Sort of, yes. That's the only one that perhaps uses it to some extent. I'm not aware about any others, so that's why I'd be interested to know, because there are like perhaps 150 companies that offer professional custody solutions, none of them using Shamir's secret.
Yeah. You know, like there are maybe 150 like custodians. The problem is then you don't hold your own keys. So like Unchained at least has multi-sig setup, so it's not in sole control for Bitcoin. And I don't know, like what's actually the question there?
Okay, no, then I mean,
okay.
I
Maybe
just
let's discuss
wonder
later.
where it would be used professionally, right? Because I have never in my life experienced anybody actually going to all the steps that are usually advertised. I liked his take on that as well, because once you start reading up on it online, for example, you find those articles about all those complications. Once you dive through all of those hoops, you end up with a classical bird bath or something. And so this is a very idealistic approach towards it, but I don't think it actually helps 99% of people to even approach that due to its complexities. The infrastructure required, like, have multiple safe locations. It's like if you say to people, just bring it to your friends, and then the reality is who has friends, right? So and that is the true reality of people, right? So
yeah, we are going to put together like a resource list of like do's and don'ts for your security seed, and Shamir's, and yeah, we're trying to like answer these questions as best as possible. It's not been like ideal so far, like describing how you should actually secure a seed. I don't think this has been like satisfactorily answered, but yeah, we are thinking about it, and we are going to put out together like the best practices.
thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. That was
Thank you.
great. Okay, so this is the end, but not the real end. Tomorrow there is more, and as you saw today, sad stage, we nail it. So we wait for you tomorrow with more amazing guests, and I hope you come. And now, as I said, there is after party. So yeah, I hope to say hi to all of you there. And thank you for all coming and for how amazing audience you were. Thank you.